Light, fast, and sometimes just plain weird, vintage aircraft that weighed next to nothing defied engineering logic and flew straight into aviation history. From wooden frames to minimal metal and engines barely larger than lawnmowers, so buckle up as we count down 6 super light vintage planes that will absolutely blow your mind. Starting off at number 6, we've got the iconic Piper J-3 Cub. Piper J-3 Cub. The little yellow airplane that taught America how to fly. Designed in the mid-1930s and rolling off production lines through the 1940s, this beloved trainer became the backbone of civilian aviation training during World War II. Weighing in at just 680 pounds empty, the J-3 Cub was a masterclass in simplicity and efficiency. What made it so remarkably light? Well, we're talking about a fabric-covered steel tube frame with minimal instrumentation, no electrical system, no starter, and certainly no fancy avionics. The entire cockpit featured just the bare essentials: stick, rudder pedals, a few basic gauges, and that's about it. Even the engine was modest, a 65-horsepower Continental A65 that sipped fuel like a hummingbird. But don't let that modest power fool you. The Cub could cruise at 75 miles per hour and had a stall speed so low, around 38 miles per hour, that it could practically land in your backyard. We're talking about an airplane that could take off in less than 200 feet and land in even shorter distances. The high-lift wing design and incredibly light wing loading meant this little bird could float through the air like a feather on a summer breeze. The J-3's legacy is absolutely legendary. Over 20,000 were built, and thousands still grace our skies today at air shows, fly-ins, and weekend adventures. Pilots often joke that if you haven't flown a Cub, you haven't really learned to fly, and honestly, they might be right. This simple, honest airplane taught generations of aviators the pure joy of stick and rudder flying. At number 5, we've got the iconic Aeronca C3, affectionately known as the Flying Bathtub.
Number 5. Aeronca C3 Flying Bathtub.
This peculiar little bird first graced our skies in 1931, emerging from the Aeronautical Corporation of America's facilities in Cincinnati, Ohio, during the heart of the Great Depression. Weighing in at just 569 pounds empty, the C3 was lighter than some modern motorcycles. This remarkable feat of engineering came at a time when most aircraft were still heavy, cumbersome machines. The secret to its featherweight status? Aeronca's engineers went absolutely minimalist with everything. The fuselage was constructed from welded steel tubing covered with lightweight fabric. No fancy aluminum sheeting here. The wings used spruce spars and ribs, also fabric-covered, keeping weight to an absolute minimum. But here's where it gets really interesting: the engine. The C3 originally flew with a tiny 36-horsepower Aeronca E113 engine, which was basically 2 cylinders opposed horizontally. Later models got the massive upgrade to 40 horsepower. To put that in perspective, that's less power than many modern riding lawnmowers, yet somehow this little miracle could lift 2 people into the air. The C3's design quirks were legendary. Its rounded, bathtub-like fuselage gave it its nickname, and the high wing configuration meant pilots sat practically on the ground with wings towering above them. The landing gear, fixed and simple, no retractable fancy business to add weight. Even the propeller was wooden to save precious pounds. Flying the C3 was an exercise in pure, unadulterated aviation. With a cruise speed of just 80 miles per hour and a stall speed so low you could practically jog alongside it, this plane taught pilots the fundamentals of flight like nothing else. It could take off in less than 500 feet and land in even less, making every farmer's field a potential airport. What really cemented the C3's legacy was its role in making aviation accessible to everyday Americans. At just $1,895, about $35,000 in today's money, It was one of the first truly affordable aircraft. Flying clubs sprouted up across the country, and suddenly, the dream of flight wasn't just for the wealthy elite. Today, restored C-3s are prized possessions at vintage fly-ins, where their distinctive puttering engines and bathtub profiles never fail to draw crowds. Several are displayed in museums, including the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, preserving this quirky chapter of aviation history for future generations. Taking the number 4 spot is the charming Taylor Cub, later known as the Piper E2, the grandfather of all those famous Cubs we know and love.
Number 4. Taylor Cub, later Piper E2.
Developed in the early 1930s by C. Gilbert Taylor, this little airplane laid the foundation for what would become one of aviation's most successful dynasties. At just 550 pounds empty, the original Taylor Cub was even lighter than its famous descendants. How did they achieve such featherweight construction? We're talking about a time when aviation was still figuring itself out, and the Taylor Cub embodied the "build it light, build it right" philosophy. The fuselage was a simple welded steel tube frame covered in fabric, with wings built using wood spars and ribs, all covered in more fabric and sealed with dope. The engine, a tiny 37 horsepower Continental A40 that barely made more power than a modern motorcycle. But here's the beautiful thing about the Taylor Cub: it didn't need much power. With such low weight and high lift wings, this little bird could take off in under 150 feet and land in even less. The cruise speed was a leisurely 70 miles per hour, but honestly, who cared? Flying the Taylor Cub was about the pure joy of being airborne, feeling every thermal and gentle breeze through the controls. The Taylor Cub's story gets even more interesting when we consider that C. Gilbert Taylor eventually sold his company to William Piper, who refined the design into the famous J-3 Cub. But the original Taylor Cub deserves our recognition as the airplane that proved light. Simple aircraft could capture hearts and open skies to everyday people. Many aviation historians consider it the true birth of recreational flying in America. Sliding into the number 3 position is the gorgeous Curtiss Robin.
Number 3. Curtiss Robin.
A 1920s stunner that combined Art Deco elegance with surprisingly light construction. Introduced in 1928, right at the height of aviation's golden age, the Robin was Curtiss's attempt to bring flying to the masses with style and substance. Weighing approximately 1,180 pounds empty, the Robin might seem heavy compared to our other entries, but remember, this was a 3-seat cabin monoplane, when most light aircraft were still open cockpit biplanes. What made the Robin special was how Curtiss achieved this relatively lightweight while providing enclosed comfort. The fuselage used a mixture of steel tubing and wood construction, with fabric covering throughout. The wings featured wooden spars and ribs with fabric covering, and the entire airplane was finished to a standard that would make modern manufacturers jealous. The Robin typically flew with a 90-horsepower Curtiss OX-5 engine, though later variants used more powerful mills. With its efficient high-wing design and relatively clean lines, the Robin could cruise at 90 miles per hour while carrying 3 people in comfort. Pretty impressive for 1928. The airplane's gentle flying characteristics and forgiving nature made it popular with both flying schools and private owners who wanted to step up from basic trainers. But here's what makes the Robin even more fascinating. It was one of the first truly successful mass-produced cabin monoplanes in America. Over 769 Robins rolled off the production line, making it incredibly popular for its era. The aircraft featured innovative design elements for its time, including large cabin windows that provided excellent visibility and a spacious interior that felt more like a flying living room than a cramped cockpit. The Robin could operate from incredibly short grass strips, needing only about 400 feet for takeoff and even less for landing. The Robin also played a crucial role in early commercial aviation. Many were used for passenger service in remote areas where larger aircraft couldn't operate, essentially serving as flying taxis connecting small towns to the growing aviation network. Some were even equipped for basic cargo hauling, proving that lightweight didn't mean limited utility. What really sets the Robin apart in aviation history is its timing and impact. Introduced just before the Great Depression, it represented the optimism and innovation of the Roaring Twenties. Many Robins were used for barnstorming, flight training, and early passenger service. The airplane proved that lightweight didn't mean sacrificing comfort or capability, a lesson that still resonates with aircraft designers today. Today, surviving Robins are absolute treasures at vintage aircraft gatherings, with their distinctive high-wing silhouette and classic 1920s styling turning heads wherever they appear. Coming in at number 2 is the absolutely incredible Pietenpol Air Camper.
Number 2. Pietenpol Air Camper.
The Air Camper weighed approximately 550 pounds empty, achieving this through ingenious use of commonly available materials. Pietenpol designed it specifically to use lumber from the local hardware store, no exotic aircraft-grade spruce required. The fuselage used a simple box design of wood and steel tubing, while the wings featured wooden spars and ribs, all covered in fabric. The genius was in the simplicity. Any competent woodworker could build one. What truly set the Air Camper apart was its engine flexibility. Pietenpol originally designed it around the Model A Ford engine. Yes, the same engine from the car. This 40-horsepower automotive conversion made flying affordable for Depression-era builders. Later builders used everything from Continental A65s to modern Corvair conversions. The Ford engine conversion was brilliant, parts were cheap, mechanics everywhere knew how to fix them, and they were remarkably reliable. Despite its humble power, the Air Camper performed admirably. Cruise speed hovered around 70 miles per hour, with a stall speed so low you could practically feel the daisies brushing the wheels. It could operate from rough fields, dirt roads, and even frozen lakes in winter. The parasol wing configuration provided spectacular visibility, making it ideal for barnstorming and sightseeing. The Air Camper's cockpit was pure vintage charm. Open air, wind in your face, minimal instruments. Most had just airspeed, altimeter, and oil pressure. Navigation, look out the side and follow the railroad tracks. This was flying reduced to its absolute essence. Pietenpol's legacy extends far beyond the aircraft itself. He freely shared his plans through magazines like Modern Mechanics, charging just $7.50 for detailed blueprints. This open-source approach inspired thousands of builders worldwide. The design became a cornerstone of the home-built movement, proving that safe, practical aircraft could be built by amateurs. Today, the Pietenpol Air Camper remains one of the most popular vintage home-built designs. Updated plans are still available, and new air campers regularly emerge from garages worldwide. The type has its own devoted following, with Pietenpol fly-ins drawing dozens of these beautiful machines. Museums treasure original examples, and Bernie Pietenpol's hometown honors him with a memorial featuring a replica of his first aircraft. The Air Camper proved that with determination, basic skills, and a Ford engine, anyone could touch the sky. Taking the number 1 spot is the jaw-dropping Santos-Dumont Demoiselle, the airplane that redefined what was possible with minimal weight and maximum audacity.
Number 1. Santos-Dumont Demoiselle.
Designed by Brazilian aviation pioneer Alberto Santos Dumont between 1907 and 1909, the Demoiselle was so far ahead of its time that it still looks futuristic today. Hold on to your hats because the Demoiselle weighed just 242 pounds empty, making it lighter than many modern motorcycles. How did Santos Dumont achieve such incredible lightness? The man was an absolute genius of minimalist design. The entire airplane was built using bamboo. Yes, bamboo for the primary structure, with silk fabric covering the wings. The landing gear was a simple wire framework, and the pilot sat on a basic wicker chair. There was no cockpit, no windscreen, no creature comforts whatsoever. This was flying stripped down to its absolute essence. The Demoiselle used a tiny engine producing between 20 and 35 horsepower, depending on the variant. With such minimal weight, this little power was enough to achieve cruise speeds of 65 miles per hour and climb rates that amazed spectators across Europe. The wing warping control system was elegant in its simplicity. The pilot literally leaned his entire body to control the aircraft, making man and machine one unified flying system. What makes the Demoiselle truly extraordinary is that Santos-Dumont gave the design away for free. He published detailed plans in Popular Mechanics magazine, declaring that aviation belonged to all humanity, not just wealthy corporations or governments. The Demoiselle influenced countless later designs and established principles of lightweight construction that are still used today. Several flying replicas exist, and they never fail to amaze audiences with their dragonfly-like grace and improbable performance. Santos-Dumont's little Demoiselle proved that with enough ingenuity and courage, you could create magic with bamboo, silk, and a dream of flight. It remains the ultimate expression of doing more with less. The perfect airplane to top our list of super-light vintage planes that continue to blow our minds more than a century later. These ultra-light vintage aircraft weren't just innovative, they were daring, different, and downright brilliant. Whether for training, sport, or sheer aviation fun, they proved that sometimes less really is more. Which one surprised you the most? Drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe for more amazing flight stories from the past.